Hi, it's Ian from the Postal Hub Podcast.
And Marek from Last Mile Experts.
And we are the Last Mile Prophets. This is the last word on the last mile. Marek, we've written about and discussed previously the last mile and e-commerce in Central Europe and Eastern Europe because it sort of flies under the radar a little bit. Perhaps because there's not much English language coverage of it. Don't know. But there's a lot of growth in there, isn't there?
Could be, and I think we're going to put that right, Ian, just now. You're right. First of all, something that shocked me when I took a step back and looked at the development of Poland in terms of e-commerce and e-commerce last mile, it's probably one of the most innovative markets in the world, and certainly one of the top ones in Europe. But Poland has got a lot of press recently, but let's talk about a few others, because we're involved in two other markets, which are quite interesting. One is Romania and the other is Turkey. And, you know, behind the scenes, as you said, probably because of maybe language issues, maybe because those countries are not at the forefront, there's a lot of stuff happening. And I think we make the mistake of just talking about what Amazon is doing or what Alibaba is doing, what JD is doing. But there are a lot of other super smart organizations. And it might be worth just sharing a few examples. Let's start with one of my favorite, because my dear friends from eMAG Sameday opened their first locker in Hungary.
And hopefully they got the software right.
Well, I'm sure they did. Well, this is where e-commerce is really good, because one thing they're always good at is software, because you need it for their core business. So what I wanted to share with you is that, you know, we've got, on one hand, we've got a company that started from almost nowhere a few years ago, eMAG. They acquired a same-day operator with the name Sameday that became a general last mile operator, that became the first scaled network of lockers, that became the first network able to do next day, same day, out of home, and all in a few years. So it's an example of how e-commerce and that understanding of the client, understanding of the needs of the last mile, gives a huge advantage. Another example is in Turkey, where you have a number of e-commerce players. Probably the largest one is a company called Trendyol. Same thing, started from nowhere. Turkey's last mile is interesting in the gentleman called Aslan Kut, who I've got a great deal of respect for, who I call him the father of Turkish e-commerce, Turkish courier, because he set up pretty much all the courier companies. So if you go and see a large Turkish e-commerce company, the model is almost plug and play the same for most of them, with the exception, of course, of the post. What that's led to is that the model is standardized, and perhaps with e-commerce it needs change. So now you've got players like Trendyol who are coming up with new ideas, like the beginnings of interactive delivery management, the beginnings of, in fact, I think they're testing now first locker capability and so on. So these organizations are driving change in the last mile. And then, you know, the final one, we talked about this, right? I think I posted this recently in Poland with the subscription model, where I've not seen anyone succeed. You've had La Poste try, I think Ozpost tried as well with the subscription model.
Yeah, had to wrap it up. New Zealand Post tried as well. But yeah, I think La Poste, I haven't read that it's gone under, Colissimo, but I hope I haven't just given it the kiss of death.
Colissimo itself is a wider product, but they have something that was a subscription model, and because we haven't heard of it, it suggests that, you know, please, if we're wrong, someone from La Poste
comment below.
But from what I understand, actually, there are two schemes. One really big one called Smart by Allegro, which is the biggest Polish e-commerce. And there's another one, I think, called Premium by Empik, which is another large Polish e-commerce and bricks and mortar, actually, book retailer. So it's really interesting how it's not just Amazon, but generally e-commerce is changing the face of the last mile.
I think we need to emphasize the potential for growth in some of these markets is huge. When you look at places, whether it's Croatia, Ukraine, you've mentioned Romania, the potential for growth is huge. But I think it's also interesting that there's been a lot of a push by Eastern European countries, including the posts, to try and grow e-commerce, because they've got the vision that if we don't do this, then the private carriers will come in. And that's a terribly negative way of putting it.
Or the e-commerce themselves.
Or the e-commerce players themselves. And so they're investing in the the infrastructure to be able to deliver a first-class e-commerce delivery experience, including same day. So,
but you know what, Ian? You've got a mixed bag, because you've got the Nordics and the Baltics, which are pretty good. And generally speaking, many of the posts have got best-in-class capability systems and out-of-home. But what is interesting is, and I think this is the opportunity in other markets, where places like Romania and Turkey, where the post is not so strong, or Poland for that matter, where much as I'd like Polish Post to be a really strong and dominant player, it's not in the same way that La Poste is in France or Deutsche Post is in Germany. And that creates huge opportunities for others.
Let's then discuss the major e-commerce players in some of these markets. So it's not just Amazon, eBay, Alibaba being sort of the major players in some of these markets. There are homegrown marketplaces, there are homegrown online retailers, or even bricks and mortar stores that have had to go online. Can you just give us a quick idea, since you've had exposure to these markets, what kind of e-commerce players there are and what it means for the last mile?
Well, this is really interesting, because in Poland, the biggest player is actually an auction site called Allegro, who interestingly, I think was famous because of a David and Goliath war or battle with eBay. And of course, the incumbent won, partly because I think at the time, eBay were feeling quite arrogant, and they felt, well, this upstart of a small Polish player will deal with them. And they didn't introduce locally customer-centric features and thinking, and failed dismally. So in Poland, the biggest player without a doubt is an auction site. Implications are there's a lot of C2X, so out of home is very important. And surprise, surprise, Poland has one of the most developed out of home networks. So it's not just lockers, where we have probably 7,000 plus now, but we have arguably around 30,000 PUDO points, which for a country of 38 million is really not bad at all. Then you've got Romania, where the dominant player is eMAG, but eMAG is more of an Amazon type organization. So it's an e-tailer rather than a marketplace. Interestingly, owned by Naspers, the guys who owned Allegro in Poland before, who, if I'm not mistaken, owned Flipkart and owned Souk. So, by the way, I wish I'd have bought shares in Naspers 10, 15 years ago. But anyway, I didn't. Story of my life. So you've got in Romania, you've got eMAG. And guess what? In the same way that in Poland, Allegro have been instrumental in developing, first of all, via the subscription product, which required low-cost delivery, the out-of-home network. In Romania, eMAG have actually achieved two things. They've really pushed on same-day and custom-centric features in to-door, but they've also launched the first locker network of any scale, where I don't know if Lucian Baltaro is looking at this video now, but I think they've got about 500 machines compared to next best player, which has maybe under 100. So developing very, very fast, changing the face of the Romanian last mile. And then finally, in Turkey, you have two players. It's quite interesting. We have two dominant e-commerce players. One is called Trendyol, the other is called Hepsiburada. And again, that market is ripe for positive disruption, because you have this traditional model of courier companies. You virtually don't have any locker technology yet. The IT side needs a lot of development. So watch this space. I mean, what could be quite interesting is at some stage, if people are interested in the future, we could do a deep dive into each market.
So comment below. Let us know what you think, if you'd like us to go into more depth in one of these markets or something like that, or if you've got your own examples that you want to share, case studies you want to share, or want to tell us how great your company is, comment below. Always happy to hear from people. Marek Różycki, thanks for being part of this Last Mile Profits video today.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone.